The first nugget you need to have in your pocket is the idea of content first. We are a content first enterprise, and you need to be a content first kind of person to be able to take the Amber Book and do well on the ARE. There are lots of people out there who will help you. They'll help you kind of emotionally through this process because it may be kind of taxing. There are people who kind of give you a bunch of tips, and we have lots of tips and we have lots of ways to help you emotionally. But if you're dealing with a test prep or support group or study group, and they're spending a lot of time, like more than 5% of the time is spent on test tips and kind of emotional support, then I think you're probably with the wrong group. I think it's really important to have some of that, but you need to be content first. And by that, I mean, you just need to learn this stuff. And that's going to take a little bit of time, probably something like 100 hours. Now, that's going to vary. Some of you are fast studiers and are going to fly through it. And some of you guys are going to YouTube everything that you want to learn some more about. So that's going to vary. But, you know, for most people, it's going to be something like 2 or 3 months. And your target's going to be something like 3 hours a day, but you're not going to beat yourself up if you get busy at work for a couple of days and fall behind. So that 2 or 3 months kind of factors that in. Now, if you're like me and you're anxious to start studying, you can probably end this video right now and go start studying because, well, content first. Almost everything else I'm going to tell you is also in the course. So you're going to hear it later. So if you want to get going and get started, you have my permission. But if you want to hear more about the ARE and kind of what to think about it beforehand, if you're that kind of person, if you're more of a planner, then I encourage you to keep listening. Number 2, there has always been overlap between divisions. In older versions of the ARE, if you were taking one division and you were looking at a question in that division, there was maybe a 15% chance that that question could have been on another division. But with this version of the ARE, overlap is the defining characteristic. It's the single biggest difference between the older versions and the current version of the ARE. So if you're looking at a division, if you're in PPD or PDD or PA or just about all of them, 5 of the 6 divisions, everything but practice management. So the other 5 you kind of think of as one exam. Because now, if you're looking at a question, what NCARB calls a test item, there's a 75% likelihood that that test item could be on a different division. So there is so much overlap between these divisions that what I want you to do is I want you to think of this as one big test. This is really intimidating for people. Not everyone, but some subset of you, it's going to be really intimidating. You want to take one test and then study for a few months and take another division and study for a few months and take a third. I don't recommend that. I want you to think of it as one exam because you're not going to save a little bit of time. You're going to save a lot of time by studying for all of it at once and then taking all of the divisions, all of your remaining divisions, all at one time. And the other advantage of that is you have leakage. You forget things that you're sure you're going to remember. Last night I put the checkbook somewhere and I said, it's underneath a cardboard box. I'm going to forget that. This morning on my way to the recording studio, my wife called and said, "Where's the checkbook?" And I could not remember. And it was just from a few waking hours ago. And you've had that same experience. So because we have leakage and because there's so much overlap, instead of studying for the content and then taking a test and studying again for the content and taking another test, just study for it all at once. The Venn diagram just declares that you should. So our first nugget was content first. Just study the material and learn it. Our second one is that there's so much overlap between the divisions, I want you to consider this one large test. Our third is that failing is a feature, not a bug, and that you need to think probabilistically. And by that I mean at the time of this recording, the average pass rate for each of the 6 divisions of the ARE is 58%. 58%. If I can get you to 85% likelihood of passing each test, 85%, that's really good if the average is 58%. You still have less than a 50% chance of passing them all on the first try. Let me say that again. If there is an 85% likelihood that you're going to pass each test, there's still less than a 50% likelihood that you're going to pass them all on the first try, which means you're likely to fail. Even if you do this right, you're likely to fail one. And so failing is a feature, not a bug. So you need to think probabilistically. You need to think like a poker player. And if you do fail and you feel pretty good about the test, you just failed it. In other words, if your test report suggests that your fail was not a miserable fail, I want you to just reschedule the exam for 60 days later. Just reschedule it right then and study some more and then take it again. That's your surest and your fastest way to licensure. Number 4, keep quiet. Keep quiet. It's not a good idea to tell your colleagues, to tell your friends, to announce on social media that you're taking an exam, because then you have the added stress of having to tell them that you didn't pass if you don't pass. And what winds up happening is we're going back to this kind of failing as a feature, not a bug. If your pride is in the line, if your reputation is on the line, if passing this exam means that you're going to be able to tell everyone that you passed, and failing it means you're going to have to tell everyone you failed, that's going to cause you to overstudy. You're going to not stop at 80 or 85%. You're going to keep going to your 90 or 95% likelihood of passing the exam. But the amount of hours you need to get to there is way more. So if this axis of the graph is the likelihood of passing the exam, and this axis is the hours that it's going to take you, we want you to stop right about here. Now, where is there? You don't know, but you'll have an idea. And frankly, I have an idea for you. So the test is kind of based on the idea that we want to stop studying right about here and then get you maybe an 80 or 85% likelihood of passing the test. Now, to get from 80% likelihood of passing the test to 90% likelihood of passing the test, you have to do all these extra hours. And in that time, you could have taken another exam and gotten to 80% likelihood of passing that test. And it is way better, in my opinion, to have 2 tests under your belt, each of which you took and had an 80% likelihood, than to have 1 test and a 90% likelihood of passing. So why does everyone do this? Why do so many people study all these extra hours just to get that extra 10% likelihood? Well, a big part of that is they're not seeing it as 80% likelihood of passing versus 90% likelihood of passing. They're seeing it as 20% likelihood of failing versus 10% likelihood of failing. They're seeing themselves as one having the chance that they're going to fail and have to tell everybody because they put it on social media. So, don't tell anyone. Don't put it on social media. Just wait till you pass the division and then think of how much fun you'll have telling everybody. Because it is an unfortunate condition of human nature. I hate it, but you know it's true. You can either have people's sympathy or you can have their respect, but you're not going to get both. So tell them after you've passed it and get their respect rather than tell them that you're taking it and risk the chances that you're going to find the sympathy of a colleague. So the first one was content first, learn the material. The second was there's overlap between the divisions, so take all the tests at once. The third is that failing is not a big deal, it's a feature. The fourth is don't overshare on social media and don't overshare with your colleagues. The fifth one is competence over balance. So what the Amber Book course is intended to do is to be the studying, not to initiate it. This isn't one source out of what I recommend being many. I recommend you take the Amber Book, you study for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever your schedule allows, get through the book, and schedule all of your remaining tests. Now, people will say, but don't you need more sources? No. It can't hurt to have more sources if you have unlimited time, or if you're the 1 in 6 people that I run across that are like me and you really enjoy studying this stuff. But if you don't want to spend extra time studying this, the Amber Book was designed to be comprehensive. The idea being that if you start the Amber Book from the beginning and go through to the end, you'll be able to finish all your remaining exams, or at least have a high likelihood of passing all your remaining exams. Number 6, you're not as bad at taking exams as you think you are. Now, I know I said in the first one that you don't want a whole lot of attaboys and you don't want a whole lot of support. and this is not to give you a whole lot of support, frankly. I just get from people all the time, Michael, I'm really bad at taking a test. That's why I went into architecture school. Fair enough. Fair enough. And certainly there are people who are more apt to do well on high-stakes standardized tests than others. That does happen. But in general, my experience from 20 years of teaching college, architecture school, and from 10 years of prepping people for the ARE is that when someone tells me that they're bad at taking tests, and then I start talking to them about the content, they typically don't know the content that well. Because if you think you're bad at taking tests, I submit that if the test was a high-stakes test, very important test like this one, important to your career, important to your image of yourself as an architect, but the test was at a level of kindergarten math, you would not be nervous about the test. You would do quite well at the test because you know the material very well. And that's our goal. We want you to know the material so well that it doesn't just look familiar, but we want it to look easy. We want it to look easy. So while there are some small subset of people who really struggle to take tests, my experience tells me if you think you're one of those people, you're probably not. You probably just don't know the material well enough to feel comfortable with it. And we're going to get you there. Number 7, it turns out we don't all learn that differently. I hear this all the time from people. We all learn differently. And again, at the margins, sure, some people learn differently. But for the most part, there's this kind of overlap, this kind of middle range. And cognitive science tells us that there are certain things that we can do to help with learning, especially in so much as learning is tied to memory. And a big part of learning is memory. Now, a lot of what I'm about to tell you, you kind of know. And a lot of it, maybe you'll know after I say it. You'll be like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. It turns out that our brains, I've been doing a lot of reading. This is like my passion now, like the last couple of months, and actually the last year now. I've been reading a lot on cognitive science, just how we learn. And it turns out that we have unlimited storage. So there's no limit to the amount of material you can get into your brain. It's the retrieval that's the hard part. The storage is in one part of your brain, and the retrieval is in another part of your brain. And so because of that, we need to exercise the retrieval like a muscle. It actually works like a muscle. The more you practice retrieving something, the better you'll own the content, and the longer you'll have the content retained. And so insofar as this is a retention game where you want to be able to remember things for the exam, it's much more important for you to work on retrieving the information than it is for you to actually work on seeing the information and putting it into your head. And for that reason, when there's a question on the Amber book, go ahead and take the time to really think about it and really try to answer it. Because the Amber book is set up with questions and then video answers. Now, if you happen to get a question right, if you happen to get one correct, don't skip it. Don't skip the video and think, well, I'm in a hurry because I have the test coming up and I'm behind, so I really need to get to the next question. I must know this topic because I got the question right. In reality, quite often, I'm going to say 30-40% of the time, the content in the wrong answers is also content you need to know for the exam. So I'll have a question, often I'll have multiple choice format, so there'll be maybe one right answer and 3 wrong ones. But it's quite common that the 3 wrong ones are also things that you need to know about. So watch the videos even if you get a question wrong. Now, within that kind of structure of retrieval, what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position to retrieve the information that you've learned just at the point where you are about to lose it, just at the point where you are about to forget it. What that means in practice is you want to look at the material again, not even for that long. You don't need to look at it long. But you want to look at the material again. And by look at it again, I don't mean look at it again like literally look at it. I mean you want to write down for yourself, okay, here's what I learned before. Here's what I remember. You want to practice retrieving it at 1 day out, so 1 day after you've learned it, 1 week after you've learned it, 1 month after you've learned it, and 1 year after you've learned it. That will give you pretty much permanent control over that material. Now, for the purposes of this exam, it's not like you need to be studying this for 1 year out. The average right now at the time of this recording is 2.2 years from when people start taking the exams to when they finish. We want to get you down way below that. We'd love to get you down a couple of months. But within those couple of months, if you can look at the material you studied yesterday for just a few minutes while you're studying today and practice retrieving it, write it down or say it aloud in your own words rather than just kind of look at it again. Look, we all know that highlighting text in a book doesn't work. We've been there. You start highlighting text and you're highlighting, and before you know it, you're highlighting like every word, and then it never helps. The best way to do something is to explain it to somebody else, to make your own test questions, to rewrite it in your own words from memory. So you want to do that after a day and after a week, and if necessary, after a month. Now, is it important for you to keep a really, really close tally of exactly what you studied? No, but it couldn't hurt to keep a little calendar, which topics you studied on which days, so that you can retrieve 1 month later or 1 week later or 1 day later. And by retrieve, you can just spend, maybe a minute or two on each topic, on each broad topic, like a minute or two on wood, just kind of telling yourself what you remember from learning about wood or roofs or electricity. So number 1 was content first, learn the material. Number 2 was that I want you to treat this like one big exam. Number 3 is that failing is a feature, not a bug. Number 4, stop oversharing. Number 5, you can just take the Amber Book and take the test. Thousands of people have done it, and you can do that too. Number 6, you're probably not as bad at taking tests as you think you are, but maybe you don't know the material as well as you need to. Number 7, you have to work at retrieval. You have to work at retrieval. All right, now get studying because you remember, content first. Good luck on the exam and let us know how you do. I know this sounds ridiculous. You wouldn't think after this many thousand people that I would care anymore. I am so rooting for you. I absolutely love hearing when people succeed at this. So please tell me after you've passed all the tests. Good luck.